I found the email buried in my junk folder on a Tuesday morning while drinking lukewarm coffee and wondering why my homeowner's insurance bill had tripled overnight. The subject line read, "Urgent, Policy Consolidation Notice," and came from someone named Patricia Whitmore, president of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association in Gilbert, Arizona. I had moved into this development 6 months ago, drawn by the manicured lawns and promise of community amenities, but this email made my stomach drop. "Dear Mr. Harris Morgan," it began, "as part of our ongoing cost-saving initiatives, the HOA board has consolidated all community insurance policies under a single master policy. Your individual homeowner's insurance has been automatically enrolled in this program. A surcharge of $847 monthly will appear on your HOA dues statement beginning next month. This is mandatory for all residents. Failure to comply will result in liens against your property." I read it 3 times. $847 per month. That was over $10,000 a year, on top of my regular HOA dues of $300 monthly. I grabbed my phone and called the number listed at the bottom of the email. "Riverside Meadows HOA. This is Patricia speaking." Her voice had that particular quality of someone who enjoyed wielding small amounts of power over others. "Hi, this is Harris Morgan from 2847 Cottonwood Drive. I just got an email about a mandatory insurance surcharge." "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Mr. Morgan. The board voted on this last month. It's all perfectly legal according to our CC and Rs. I never received notice of this vote, and $800 seems excessive. The notice was posted on our community bulletin board and website. Ignorance of HOA policy is not an excuse. If you have concerns, you can attend our next board meeting on the 15th. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling that unique combination of anger and helplessness that comes from dealing with petty bureaucracy. My job as a software engineer paid well enough, but an extra 10 grand a year would seriously impact my budget. I had just bought this house, a 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a small backyard, and was already stretching to make the mortgage payments. I pulled up the HOA website, a poorly designed relic that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2015. After clicking through several broken links, I found the meeting minutes from last month. Sure enough, there was a line item about Policy Consolidation Initiative, with a vote of 4-1 in favor. No details about costs. No explanation of why this was necessary. Just a brief note that the community insurance program will provide comprehensive coverage at reduced rates. That evening, I knocked on my neighbor's door. Tom Richardson had lived in Riverside Meadows for 5 years and seemed like a reasonable guy. He answered in a Cardinals jersey, beer in hand. "Harris. Hey. Just watching the game." "Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask about this insurance thing with the HOA. His expression darkened. "You got that email too?" "Yeah, Patricia and her cronies pushed that through. Most people in the development are pretty pissed about it." "Did you know this was coming?" "Not really. They mentioned something vague at a meeting a few months back about exploring insurance options, but nothing concrete. Then suddenly last month they held a special meeting on a Wednesday afternoon when most people are at work. 4 board members showed up and voted it through. The one dissenting vote was Mark Chen, but he resigned from the board last week. Why did he resign?" Tom took a sip of his beer. Said he couldn't be part of something this shady. He tried to get the vote overturned, claimed proper notice wasn't given, but Patricia shut him down. "Look, between you and me, something doesn't smell right about this whole thing. That's way too much money for insurance." I went home and spent the next 3 hours researching homeowners' insurance costs in Arizona. Even the most comprehensive policies for homes in our price range ran maybe $1,500 to $2,000 a year. $800 per month per household made no sense. I pulled out my calculator. Riverside Meadows had 230 homes. If everyone was paying this surcharge, that was almost $200,000 monthly. Over $2 million a year. For what? The next morning, I took a sick day and drove to the Maricopa County Recorder's office in Phoenix. If the HOA had taken out some kind of master insurance policy, there should be documents on file. After explaining what I needed to a helpful clerk named Jennifer, she directed me to the public records terminal. I searched for any documents filed by the Riverside Meadows HOA in the past 6 months. There were a few standard maintenance contracts, some lien notifications against homeowners who had fallen behind on dues, but nothing about insurance policies. That was odd. Master insurance policies for developments usually required filing with the county. "Excuse me," I said to Jennifer. If an HOA takes out a large insurance policy covering all the homes in a development, would that be filed here? Depends on the type of policy. If it's general liability or property insurance for common areas, maybe not. But if it's supposed to replace individual homeowners' policies, there should be documentation. Have you checked with the Arizona Department of Insurance? I hadn't, but I did as soon as I got back to my car. The Department of Insurance had an online portal for verifying policies and licensed insurers. I searched for Riverside Meadows HOA. Nothing came up. I tried variations of the name. Still nothing. That cold feeling in my stomach intensified. I called my own insurance company, Southwest Home Insurance, and spoke with my agent, a guy named Derek, who had set up my original policy. Derek, this is Harris Morgan. Quick question. My HOA is claiming they've set up a master insurance policy that replaces our individual policies. Can they do that? Technically, yes, if it's outlined in your CC and Rs and they follow proper procedures. But Harris, I still show your policy as active. Nobody has contacted us about cancellation. So my policy is still in effect. As far as I know, yes. And I would have gotten notice if there was any kind of master policy situation. Insurance companies talk to each other about this stuff. I haven't heard anything. I thanked him and hung up. The pieces were starting to come together, and none of them formed a picture I liked. The HOA was collecting money for an insurance policy that apparently didn't exist, at least not in any official capacity. This wasn't just bureaucratic incompetence. This was fraud. But I needed proof before I could do anything about it. The HOA meeting on the 15th was held in the community center, a bland rectangular building near the entrance to our development. I arrived 15 minutes early and found about 40 other homeowners already there, most looking equally unhappy. The room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board members would sit. Tom Richardson waved me over. Big turnout tonight. Word is spreading about this insurance scam. You think it's a scam too? Harris, I've been doing some digging. I know a guy who works in insurance and he told me there's no way a legitimate policy costs that much. Something's rotten. Patricia Whitmore entered precisely at 7, followed by 3 other board members. Donald Pierce, a retired accountant with a permanent scowl. Linda Ferguson, a real estate agent who seemed perpetually distracted by her phone. And Robert Hayes, who owned several properties in the development and rarely spoke at meetings. Patricia called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of a gavel. She was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, severe haircut, wearing a blazer that screamed middle management authority. Her lips were pursed in a thin line that suggested she spent most of her life disapproving of things. Before we begin regular business, I'm aware many of you have questions about the insurance policy consolidation. Let me be clear. This decision was made by the board in the best interest of the community. It provides comprehensive coverage and protects all homeowners. A woman in the 3rd row stood up. Patricia, why does it cost so much? My regular insurance was less than $2,000 a year. You're charging almost $11,000. The policy covers things your individual policy didn't. Liability, community infrastructure, legal protection. It's comprehensive. Can we see the policy documents? I asked, standing up. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Policy documents are confidential and contain proprietary information. We're paying for it. We have a right to see what we're paying for. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The board has reviewed the policy thoroughly. That should be sufficient. Tom stood up. That's not how this works, Patricia. We're not asking for proprietary insurance company secrets. We're asking to see proof that this policy exists and what it covers. Basic transparency. Patricia's face flushed red. I don't appreciate your tone, Mr. Richardson. The board operates within its legal authority as outlined in the CC and Rs. If you don't like our decisions, you're welcome to run for the board yourself during next year's elections. I want to see the insurance policy documents, I said firmly. Today, right now. Other voices joined in. Show us the policy. We have a right to know. This is our money. Donald Pierce leaned toward Patricia and whispered something. She listened, then nodded curtly. Fine. The policy documents are kept in our office. I'll make copies available for review by appointment. But I want to make something clear. This program is mandatory. Failure to pay will result in liens and possible foreclosure proceedings. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. People shouted questions and complaints. Patricia tried to move on to other business, but nobody cared about landscaping bids or pool maintenance schedules when they were being charged $10,000 for a possibly fraudulent insurance policy. I stayed after most people left, waiting for a chance to speak with Patricia directly. She was packing up papers and ignoring me pointedly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'd like to make an appointment to review those policy documents. Call the office during business hours." She didn't look up. "I'm calling right now." I pulled out my phone. "What's the number?" She finally met my eyes. There was something calculating in her expression, like she was trying to figure out how much of a threat I posed. "Monday at 10. The office is on the second floor of this building." I showed up Monday at 9:45. The HOA office was a cramped room with 2 desks, filing cabinets, and walls covered in community notices about trash day schedules and architectural review applications. Patricia sat at the larger desk, typing on a computer that looked like it was from the early 2000s. "Mr. Morgan." Punctual. She didn't sound pleased about it. "I'm here to review the insurance policy documents." She pulled a thin manila folder from her desk drawer and slid it across to me. "Here, you have 30 minutes. I opened the folder. Inside was a 3-page document from a company called Consolidated Community Insurance Services based in Tucson. The policy number, effective dates, and coverage amounts were listed, along with a breakdown of premiums. The monthly premium for the entire development was listed as $195,000. "This says the premium is $195,000 monthly. You're collecting over $200,000 from residents. Where's the extra money going?" "Administrative costs, processing fees, it's all accounted for." "Can I see those accounting records?" "No. Financial details are handled by the board treasurer." "Then I'd like to speak with Donald Pierce." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Mr. Pierce is not available." I took out my phone and started photographing each page of the document. Patricia lunged forward. "You can't do that. These are public records. I'm a homeowner paying for this policy. I have every right to document what I'm paying for." She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the legal grounds. I finished photographing the documents and handed the folder back. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll be in touch if I have more questions." As soon as I got to my car, I called the number listed on the insurance documents. It rang 4 times, then went to a generic voicemail. "You've reached Consolidated Community Insurance Services. Please leave a message." I tried again an hour later. Same result. I tried 3 more times throughout the day. Never once did a human answer. That evening, I looked up Consolidated Community Insurance Services online. Their website was a single page with stock photos of happy families and vague language about comprehensive community coverage solutions. No list of actual services. No information about the company's history or leadership. No physical address beyond a P.O. box in Tucson. I checked with the Arizona Department of Insurance again. Consolidated Community Insurance Services was registered as a licensed insurance provider, but just barely. They'd gotten their license only 4 months ago. Before that, nothing. No business history, no track record, no reviews or ratings from any insurance oversight organizations. This was looking more and more like a shell company. I needed help, so I called my friend Marcus Henderson, a lawyer who specialized in real estate law. We'd gone to Arizona State University together and had stayed in touch over the years. He agreed to meet me for lunch the next day at a Mexican place in downtown Gilbert. Marcus listened while I explained the whole situation, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back and let out a low whistle. "Harris, if what you're describing is accurate, this is insurance fraud, possibly embezzlement too, depending on where that money is actually going. What can I do about it?" "First, you need to find out if this policy is real. Call the insurance company directly, not through the HOA. If you can't get through, that's a red flag. Second, you need to gather as much documentation as possible. Get other homeowners involved. The more evidence you have of people paying this surcharge, the stronger your case. Third, consider filing a complaint with the Arizona Department of Insurance and the State Attorney General's office. Will that be enough to stop the HOA from putting liens on properties?" Marcus grimaced. "That's the tricky part. HOAs have broad authority to enforce payment of dues and assessments. Even if the insurance surcharge is fraudulent, it might take months to resolve through the courts. In the meantime, they could still pursue liens. So I'm stuck paying for fake insurance or losing my house? Not necessarily. You could pay under protest and file a lawsuit to recover the funds, or you could refuse to pay and fight the lien, but that's riskier. The safest route is to build a case, get law enforcement involved, and shut down the fraud before they can take action against you." I spent the rest of the week gathering evidence. I talked to every neighbor who would listen, documenting who had received the insurance surcharge notice and how much they were being charged. Most people were paying the same $847 monthly, but a few owners of larger homes were being charged over $1,000. Tom Richardson became my unofficial partner in this investigation. He'd always been suspicious of Patricia and her board cronies, and now he had a legitimate reason to dig deeper. Together, we requested copies of HOA financial records going back 2 years. Patricia denied the request, claiming financial records were only available to board members. That was when Marcus told us about Arizona's Homeowners Association law. According to Arizona Revised Statutes Title 33, Chapter 16, HOA members had an explicit right to inspect and copy association records, including financial statements. We sent a formal written request citing the specific statute. Patricia couldn't legally refuse. A week later, we received copies of the financial records. Or rather, we received what Patricia claimed were complete financial records. The documents showed income from monthly dues, expenses for landscaping and maintenance, and a line item for insurance program that started appearing 4 months ago. But the amounts didn't match what residents were actually paying. According to the financial statements, the HOA was collecting only about $80,000 monthly for insurance. We knew the real number was closer to $200,000. Someone was cooking the books. "Look at this," Tom said, pointing to a series of transfers listed under miscellaneous expenses. Every month there's a transfer of about $120,000 to something called Community Development Services. What the hell is that? I searched through the rest of the documents. Community Development Services appeared nowhere else. No explanation of what it was, no contract on file, nothing. "I think we found where the missing money is going," I said. We took our findings to Marcus, who agreed we now had enough evidence to involve law enforcement. He helped us draft a formal complaint to the Arizona Attorney General's Office, Criminal Division, outlining the suspected fraud. We included copies of all the documents we'd gathered, statements from homeowners about the insurance surcharges, and our analysis showing the discrepancy between collected funds and reported income. 3 weeks later, I got a call from an investigator named Detective Sarah Chen from the Gilbert Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. She wanted to meet to discuss our complaint. We met at a coffee shop near my office. Detective Chen was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed and methodical. She'd already reviewed our documentation and had some follow-up questions. "Mr. Morgan, have you been able to contact Consolidated Community Insurance Services directly?" "No. I've tried dozens of times. It always goes to voicemail, and nobody returns calls." "That's consistent with what we found. We sent an investigator to the Tucson address. It's a UPS store mailbox. The phone number routes to a burner cell. For all practical purposes, the company doesn't exist beyond paperwork." My heart raced. "So it's definitely fraud?" "It's looking that way. We're also investigating the connection between Patricia Whitmore and Community Development Services. Initial record searches show that company was registered 6 months ago by a woman named Denise Whitmore, as in Patricia Whitmore, her daughter. We think Patricia set up the fake insurance company and the shell company to funnel HOA funds to her family. She's been embezzling about $120,000 monthly for the past 4 months. That's nearly $600,000. I felt dizzy. $600,000. That was grand theft, wire fraud, probably a dozen other crimes. And I had almost been part of funding it without even knowing. "What happens now?" Tom asked. He'd come with me to the meeting. "We're building a case. We need to document the money trail, interview other board members to see who knew what, and gather enough evidence for the prosecutor to file charges. In the meantime, I need you both to act normal. Don't confront Patricia or tip her off that we're investigating." "Can you do that?" We both nodded, though the idea of seeing Patricia at the next HOA meeting and pretending everything was fine made my skin crawl. The investigation moved slowly. Detective Chen explained that financial crimes required meticulous documentation. They needed to trace every dollar, verify every transaction, and build an airtight case. Meanwhile, I still had to decide whether to pay the fraudulent insurance surcharge. Marcus advised me to pay under protest. "Write on the check that you're paying under protest and only due to threat of liens. Keep copies of everything. That way, when this is resolved, you'll have a stronger claim to recover the money." I hated doing it, but I wrote the check for $847 with "paid under protest" in the memo line. It felt like funding my own victimization. The next HOA meeting was torture. Patricia presided with her usual imperious attitude. discussing mundane topics like replacing the community center's air conditioning unit and approving a new shade of beige for house trim colors. I sat in the back with Tom, watching her and wondering how someone could steal that much money and then show up to argue about paint colors like nothing was wrong. During the comment period, a homeowner named Janet Kim stood up. "I want to revisit the insurance situation. Several of us have been trying to file claims with Consolidated Community Insurance, and nobody responds. I had a pipe burst last month and my individual policy was canceled, supposedly because of the master policy. Now I'm out $6,000 in damages and nobody will help me." My blood went cold. Patricia's insurance scam wasn't just stealing money. It was leaving people vulnerable when they actually needed coverage. Patricia's face remained neutral. "Did you follow the proper claims procedure as outlined in the policy documents?" "There is no claims procedure. I've called 50 times. Nobody answers. I tried emailing. The emails bounce back. Patricia, I think this insurance company is fake." The room erupted in voices. Other people shared similar stories. A man named David Torres had his car stolen from his driveway and the insurance company never responded. A woman named Rachel Kim, I later found out Janet's sister-in-law, had a tree fall on her roof during a storm and couldn't get anyone to process her claim. Patricia banged her gavel. "These are operational issues with the insurance company, not the HOA. You need to resolve them directly with Consolidated Community Insurance." "How can we resolve anything when they don't exist?" Janet shouted. "I looked them up. They're a fake company. You're scamming all of us." Patricia stood up, her face red. "That's slander. I'll have you know the board conducted extensive due diligence before selecting this provider. If you continue to make false accusations, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action." Tom leaned over to me. "She's threatening people now. She knows the walls are closing in." After the meeting, Janet, David, and several other homeowners approached me. Word had spread that Tom and I were investigating the insurance situation. They wanted to help. "We should organize," Janet said. "Get everyone together who's been affected. The more people who come forward, the stronger the case." I glanced at Tom. We weren't supposed to tip off Patricia that an investigation was underway, but people needed to know they weren't alone. And frankly, they deserved to know that help was coming. "Let's meet at my place tomorrow night," I said. "Spread the word quietly. Don't post about it on social media or the community forums. Just word of mouth to people you trust." 23 people showed up at my house the next evening. We crammed into my living room and kitchen, some sitting on the floor. I explained what Tom and I had discovered and that law enforcement was investigating. The relief on people's faces was palpable. "How long until something happens?" David asked. "I'm supposed to pay the surcharge again next week, but I don't want to give that woman another dollar." "I understand, but legally, you might have to pay to avoid liens," I said. "Pay under protest. Write it on the check. Document everything. Once charges are filed, we can work on recovering the money." "What if she runs?" someone asked. "If she knows we're on to her, what's stopping her from taking the money and disappearing?" I hadn't considered that. I texted Detective Chen immediately. "Homeowners are getting suspicious. Multiple insurance claims denied. Worried subject might flee." She responded within minutes. "Understood. Accelerating timeline. We'll be in touch soon." The breakthrough came 2 days later. Detective Chen called me at work. "We executed search warrants this morning on Patricia Whitmore's home and the HOA office. We found extensive evidence of fraud. Bank records show she transferred nearly $600,000 from HOA accounts to personal accounts in her and her daughter's names. We've also documented that Consolidated Community Insurance Services is a shell company with no actual insurance underwriting capability." "So what happens now?" "Patricia Whitmore is being arrested as we speak on charges of theft, fraud, and embezzlement. We're also looking at charges against her daughter Denise and possibly other board members who were aware of the scheme. The district attorney will be filing formal charges within the next 48 hours. I thanked her and hung up, feeling a wave of relief mixed with lingering anger. Patricia was finally facing consequences, but the damage was already done. People had lost money. Some had property damage that wasn't covered because their real insurance had been canceled based on the promise of the fake master policy. The news spread through Riverside Meadows like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew Patricia had been arrested. The local news picked up the story. HOA president arrested for embezzling hundreds of thousands from homeowners. Patricia's booking photo showed her looking defiant, lips still pursed in that disapproving line. The next HOA meeting was packed. Nearly every homeowner in the development showed up. The remaining board members, Donald Pierce, Linda Ferguson, and Robert Hayes, sat at the front table looking shell-shocked. Donald cleared his throat. As you all know, Patricia has been arrested. The board is suspending all insurance surcharges immediately, effective this month. We're working with legal counsel to understand our options for recovering funds and addressing the insurance coverage gap. Did you know? Someone shouted. Did you know what Patricia was doing? Donald's face went pale. I swear I didn't know. She handled most of the financial matters herself. I should have paid more attention, should have asked more questions, but I didn't know it was fraud. Detective Chen had told me that the investigation cleared Donald, Linda, and Robert of criminal wrongdoing. They were negligent, certainly, but not complicit. Patricia had been careful to hide the details of her scheme from the other board members. What about people whose insurance claims were denied? Janet asked. I'm still out $6,000 because of Patricia's fake insurance company. Robert spoke up. The HOA's actual insurance policy, our real one for common areas, doesn't cover individual homeowner losses, but we're exploring whether we can use HOA reserves to reimburse people. It'll require a vote. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Patricia's scheme came to light. She had started small, adding a modest surcharge to HOA dues and claiming it was for insurance rate increases. When nobody questioned it, she got bolder. She created Consolidated Community Insurance Services, a company that existed only on paper. She sent out official-looking policy documents and collected massive surcharges. Most of the money went into accounts controlled by her and her daughter. The really insidious part was that she had actually encouraged people to cancel their individual insurance policies, claiming the master policy provided better coverage. At least 15 families in Riverside Meadows had canceled their real insurance and were left completely unprotected. When they had claims, there was nobody to pay them because the insurance company was fake. Patricia's daughter Denise was arrested a week after her mother. Both faced multiple felony counts: theft, fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and operating a fraudulent insurance company. The district attorney's office estimated they'd stolen nearly $650,000 by the time they were caught. I attended the preliminary hearing in Maricopa County Superior Court. Patricia showed up in a gray pantsuit, still maintaining that air of superiority even though she was in handcuffs. Her lawyer argued that she had simply made poor business decisions and hadn't intended to defraud anyone. The judge wasn't buying it. Ms. Whitmore, you created a fake insurance company, collected hundreds of thousands of dollars under false pretenses, and left homeowners vulnerable when they needed coverage. That's not a poor business decision. That's criminal fraud. Bail is set at $500,000. Patricia's face finally cracked. The reality of her situation seemed to hit her all at once. She wasn't the powerful HOA president anymore. She was a criminal defendant facing years in prison. Back in Riverside Meadows, we had to figure out how to move forward. The board resigned en masse and a special election was held to select new leadership. Tom Richardson ran and won a seat, as did Janet Kim and David Torres. I declined to run, content to let others take the reins while I focused on recovering my money. Marcus helped organize a class action lawsuit against Patricia, Denise, and the fake insurance company. We sued for return of all fraudulently collected surcharges, plus damages for those who had suffered losses due to lack of coverage. The lawsuit was straightforward since the criminal case provided extensive documentation of the fraud. Patricia's assets were frozen pending the criminal trial. Investigators found about $400,000 in various bank accounts. The rest had apparently been spent on luxury purchases, a new BMW, expensive vacations, jewelry. Denise had bought a condo in Scottsdale with some of the money. The criminal trial began in September, 7 months after Patricia's arrest. I attended every day, watching as prosecutors methodically presented their case. Bank records, emails, testimony from homeowners, expert witnesses explaining insurance regulations. It was damning. Patricia's defense was weak. Her lawyer tried to argue that she genuinely believed she was acting in the HOA's best interest and that the insurance arrangement was legitimate. But the evidence was overwhelming. The fake company, the shell accounts, the transfers to personal accounts. There was no innocent explanation. On the 4th day of trial, Patricia's lawyer approached the prosecutor during a recess. They talked in hushed tones for several minutes. When court resumed, Patricia's lawyer addressed the judge. "Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a guilty plea." Patricia pleaded guilty to multiple counts of theft and fraud in exchange for the prosecution dropping some of the lesser charges. The plea agreement called for a sentence of 8 to 12 years in prison and full restitution to victims. Sentencing was held 3 weeks later. The judge allowed victims to make impact statements. Janet Kim spoke about the $6,000 in pipe damage she'd had to pay out of pocket. David Torres talked about his stolen car and how the lack of insurance nearly bankrupted him. A dozen others shared similar stories. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. I moved to Riverside Meadows because I wanted to be part of a community. Patricia Whitmore betrayed that trust. She exploited the power we gave her and stole from people who believed they were following the rules. The financial damage is bad enough, but the emotional damage, the loss of trust, that might take even longer to repair. The judge sentenced Patricia to 10 years in Arizona State Prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of $650,000. Denise received 5 years and was also ordered to pay restitution. The civil lawsuit proceeded in parallel. With Patricia's criminal conviction, our case was essentially proven. The judge ordered Patricia and Denise to pay damages to all affected homeowners. The $400,000 in frozen assets was distributed proportionally to victims. I got back about $4,000 of the money I'd paid in surcharges. It wasn't everything, but it was something. For those who had suffered property losses due to lack of insurance, the HOA voted to use reserve funds to provide partial reimbursement. It wasn't a full recovery, but Janet got $3,000 toward her pipe damage, and David received help with his car situation. The community rallied together, holding fundraisers and organizing support for those who had been hit hardest. The new board, led by Tom, implemented reforms to prevent future fraud. All financial transactions now required approval from multiple board members. Monthly financial statements were posted publicly on the HOA website. An independent auditor reviewed the books quarterly. And most importantly, homeowners were guaranteed access to all HOA records without having to cite specific statutes or fight with board members. It took nearly a year, but Riverside Meadows slowly recovered. The lawns were still manicured, the pool still sparkled in the Arizona sun, and people gradually learned to trust again. New residents moved in, drawn by the lower home prices after the scandal. We told them the story, not to scare them but to remind everyone why transparency and accountability mattered. I ran into Mark Chen, the board member who had resigned in protest before everything exploded. He'd moved to a different development but came back to visit friends. "I heard you were the one who figured it out," he said. "That took guts." Patricia was threatening everyone with liens and lawsuits. Most people would have just paid and kept quiet. "I almost did," I admitted, "but something didn't feel right, and once I started digging, I couldn't stop. You saved a lot of people a lot of money and trouble." The longer her scheme went on, the worse it would have gotten. He was right. If Patricia had continued for another year or two, she might have stolen millions. More people would have canceled their real insurance. More would have faced uncovered losses. The damage would have been catastrophic. The insurance issue taught me something important about community living. HOAs serve a real purpose. They maintain common areas, enforce standards, and handle collective concerns. But they also wield significant power over homeowners, power that can be abused if nobody pays attention. The assumption that board members always act in good faith is dangerous. Transparency isn't just a nice idea. It's essential protection against fraud and corruption. I also learned that fighting back, even against intimidating authority figures, is possible. Patricia had tried to silence questioning with threats of liens and lawsuits. She'd hidden behind legal jargon and bureaucratic procedures. But homeowners had rights, both legal and moral. We had the right to see financial records, to question decisions, to demand accountability. Exercising those rights took courage, but it was necessary. In March of the following year, I received a check for another $1,000. Additional funds had been recovered from Denise's condo sale, and the money was being distributed to victims. Every little bit helped. In total, I recovered about 60% of what I'd paid in fraudulent surcharges. Some people recovered more, some less, depending on how much they'd paid and when the Gilbert community recognized our efforts. The local paper ran a story about how homeowners had uncovered and reported the fraud. Tom, Janet, and I were interviewed, along with Detective Chen and the prosecutor who handled the case. It felt strange being portrayed as heroes. We'd just done what anyone should do when confronted with obvious wrongdoing. Patricia sent a letter to the court asking for early release after serving 3 years. The request was denied. She's currently incarcerated at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville and won't be eligible for parole until 2031. Denise was released after serving 3 years and is on probation. She's prohibited from serving on any HOA board or handling other people's money in any capacity. Life in Riverside Meadows returned to a comfortable normalcy. The new board handled business efficiently and transparently. Monthly dues covered actual expenses, and everyone knew where their money was going. The trust wasn't completely restored, but it was healing. I still live in my house on Cottonwood Drive. Mortgage is manageable now without the fraudulent insurance surcharge. My backyard has a garden that I work on weekends. Tom and his wife host barbecues every month, and Janet organized a neighborhood watch program. We look out for each other now, in ways both big and small. Sometimes I think about that email I found in my junk folder, the one that started everything. If I'd ignored it, if I'd just paid without questioning, Patricia might still be stealing from us. Other developments might have fallen victim to similar schemes. The ripple effects of speaking up extended far beyond Riverside Meadows. The Arizona legislature even passed new regulations for HOAs in response to our case. Master insurance policies now require more disclosure and oversight. HOA boards must provide quarterly financial reports to all homeowners, and there are stronger penalties for board members who commit fraud. Our nightmare had led to reforms that would protect other homeowners across the state. On a warm evening in May, almost 2 years after I first discovered the insurance fraud, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Board meeting tomorrow at 7. We're voting on new landscaping for the entrance. Try to stay awake. I smiled. Boring HOA business was exactly what we needed. No fraud, no scandal, no criminal investigations. Just mundane decisions about flowers and mulch. The insurance policy I have now is legitimate. Southwest Home Insurance, the same company I'd been with before Patricia's scheme. Derek, my agent, had called me personally to apologize for not catching the cancellation attempts earlier. He'd set up my new policy with a discount as a gesture of goodwill. The premium was $1,500 a year, reasonable and honest. I never found out exactly why Patricia did it. Greed was the obvious answer, but there had to be more to it. The planning, the fake company, the shell accounts, it all took effort. She'd spent months setting up her scheme, maintaining it, covering her tracks. For what? A BMW and some jewelry? It seemed like such a waste. Maybe that was the real lesson. People convince themselves they deserve what they're taking. Patricia probably believed she worked hard as HOA president and deserved compensation beyond the satisfaction of community service. She probably rationalized that homeowners wouldn't miss the money, that she was entitled to it somehow. The mental gymnastics required to steal hundreds of thousands from your neighbors and sleep at night must have been Olympic level. But the community had survived. We'd caught the fraud, recovered most of the money, and implemented safeguards against future abuse. Riverside Meadows was stronger now, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. We'd learned to question authority, to demand transparency, and to support each other when things went wrong. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, lights flickered on in houses up and down the street. Families having dinner, kids doing homework, people living their lives in the community we'd fought to protect. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we'd earned the right to enjoy it. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. Saw the final restitution payment went through. Congrats on recovering your money. Drinks Friday to celebrate? I typed back, absolutely. You earned it too. The story could have ended differently. If Patricia had been smarter, if she'd stolen less conspicuously, if homeowners had been more complacent, the fraud might have continued for years. But a combination of vigilant residents, determined investigators, and a legal system that actually worked had brought justice. I finished my beer and went inside, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow I'd go to work, write some code, attend some meetings, live my normal life. And tomorrow evening I'd go to that HOA board meeting and listen to Tom and Janet discuss landscaping options. I might even volunteer to help with the spring cleanup project, because that's what community means. Not blind trust in authority, but active participation. Not assuming everything is fine, but asking questions when something seems wrong. Not looking the other way when you spot problems, but speaking up even when it's uncomfortable. The insurance fraud was over. Patricia was in prison. The money was mostly recovered. And Riverside Meadows, despite everything, was home. A little scarred, a little wiser, but home nonetheless. And every month when I wrote my HOA dues check, a reasonable $300 that covered actual services. I felt grateful that I'd found that email in my junk folder and asked the questions that needed asking. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. A phone call, a public records request, a refusal to accept because I said so as an answer. These things matter. They protect communities, expose fraud, and hold powerful people accountable. I settled into my couch and turned on the television. Just another Tuesday evening in suburban Arizona. The news was on. Something about city council debates over water rights. Important stuff, but nothing that directly affected me tonight. I had done my part. I'd fought the fight that needed fighting. Now I could rest, confident that Riverside Meadows was in good hands and that future residents would benefit from the lessons we'd learned the hard way. The HOA insurance fraud scandal of Riverside Meadows became a case study in legal and business ethics courses at Arizona State University. Marcus told me about it with amusement. Students analyzed what went wrong, how it was detected, and what safeguards could prevent similar frauds. Our real-life nightmare was teaching material for the next generation. I was even invited to speak to one of the classes. 30 students sitting in a lecture hall, looking at me expectantly, waiting to hear about real-world fraud detection. I told them the truth. I wasn't a hero or a detective. I was just a homeowner who got a suspicious email and decided to ask questions. But I also told them that asking questions, demanding transparency, and refusing to accept convenient lies were skills everyone needed, whether dealing with HOAs or any other organization that wielded power over their lives. The moment you stop questioning authority is the moment authority becomes dangerous, I said. Not because all authority is bad, but because unchecked power always leads to abuse. Someone has to be watching, has to be asking the hard questions. It's tedious and often thankless, but it's necessary. The students nodded and took notes. One raised her hand. What would you have done if the police hadn't taken your complaint seriously? I would have gone to the media, I said. To consumer protection agencies, to state legislators, to anyone who would listen. Because the truth matters, and fraud doesn't fix itself. Someone has to shine a light on it. After the class, a few students came up to thank me. One, a young woman named Stephanie, said her family had recently moved into an HOA community and had been dealing with questionable fees. I'm going to tell my dad to request the financial records, she said. After hearing your story, I think something might be wrong. I gave her Marcus's card. If your dad needs legal help, call this lawyer. He knows HOA law inside and out. Driving home from the university, I thought about impact and legacy. Patricia's legacy was prison time and a criminal record. My legacy, if you could call it that, was encouraging others to ask questions and hold leaders accountable. I knew which one I preferred. The seasons changed in Arizona, though less dramatically than in other parts of the country. Summer brought brutal heat, winter brought mild temperatures and tourists. Through it all, Riverside Meadows continued its rhythm. Lawns were mowed, pools were cleaned, and the HOA board handled business with a level of transparency that would have seemed radical before the scandal. Tom proved to be an excellent board member. He instituted monthly town halls where any homeowner could ask questions or raise concerns. Financial statements were emailed to everyone, not just posted on a website many people never visited. And he established a policy that any expenditure over $5,000 required approval from a majority of homeowners, not just the board. We're probably overcorrecting, he admitted to me one evening, but after what happened with Patricia, I'd rather have too much oversight than too little. I agreed. The minor inconvenience of more meetings and votes was worth it for the peace of mind that nobody was stealing from us. Jeanette implemented a community education program, bringing in speakers to talk about homeowner rights, financial literacy, and how HOAs worked. Attendance was always strong. People wanted to learn, wanted to protect themselves and their investments. Knowledge was power, and we'd learned that lesson the hard way. As I write this, sitting in my home office overlooking the quiet street, I'm struck by how normal everything feels now. The scandal that consumed my life for months is now just history, a story we tell new residents as a cautionary tale. The fear and anger have faded, replaced by cautious optimism and genuine community spirit. My insurance policy is legitimate and affordable. My HOA dues cover real services. The board is transparent and accountable. These things should be basic expectations, but I've learned not to take them for granted. Vigilance is the price of security, both personal and communal. I sometimes wonder if Patricia ever reflects on her choices. Does she regret the fraud or just getting caught? Does she understand the harm she caused, or does she still justify it to herself? I'll probably never know, and maybe it doesn't matter. She's facing the consequences of her actions, and we've moved on. The final chapter of this story isn't about Patricia or fraud or investigations. It's about rebuilding and resilience. It's about a community that faced betrayal and chose to come together rather than fall apart. It's about ordinary people doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to look the away. Riverside Meadows isn't perfect. We still argue about paint colors and parking rules, and whether the pool should stay open past Labor Day. But those arguments happen in the light, with transparency and accountability. Nobody fears retaliation for speaking up. Nobody worries that questioning the board will result in harassment or threats. And every month when I write that check for my HOA dues, $300 for services rendered and expenses incurred, I remember what could have been. I remember the fear of losing my home over a fraudulent insurance scheme. I remember the frustration of being stonewalled by Patricia. I remember the relief when Detective Chen called to say they'd found evidence of the fraud. Most of all, I remember that one person asking questions can make a difference. It doesn't take special training or expertise. It takes curiosity, persistence, and the willingness to speak up when something doesn't seem right. Those qualities are available to everyone, and exercising them is how communities protect themselves from those who would exploit them. The sun has set fully now, and Riverside Meadows is bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Somewhere in the development, Tom is probably reviewing agenda items for tomorrow's board meeting. Janet is likely planning the next community education event, and hundreds of homeowners are simply living their lives, secure in the knowledge that their HOA is working for them, not against them. That security, that trust, was earned through hard work and difficult confrontations. But it was worth it. Every uncomfortable conversation, every hour spent reviewing financial records, every moment of doubt and fear during the investigation, all of it was worth it to reach this point of stability and transparency. I close my laptop and head to the kitchen for another beer. Tomorrow is another day in Riverside Meadows, and it will probably be wonderfully, perfectly boring. And after everything we've been through, boring sounds absolutely perfect.